So this is the Cannondale Supersix EVO, Cannondale's lightweight, flagship, at the moment do-it-all racing machine. This one is the Supersix EVO in the LAB71 in last year's team colours, and this is actually my bike. So I've had a lot of questions about it, and I thought I'd just jump on and give a long-term review since I've owned this for about 9 or so months. Done about just over 15,000 kilometers on it, raced it, ridden it, and then I'm also lucky enough to give the thoughts and process about it as also a mechanic, because I've been a mechanic, mechanicking all sorts of bikes from the bottom to the top level for about the last 9 years. So I thought I'd jump on and share my opinions of it. So let's dive in and firstly have a look at what this bike is made of. So on the drivetrain, we've got ourselves a 12-speed Ultegra drivetrain, is what it comes stock as. But I've actually upgraded the chain to cassette because you can save a fair bit of weight there. Chain's a bit more efficient than the stock Ultegra one. And don't tell anyone, but that's an 11-speed crankset. Legal. Running the 55-42 chain rings and 11-34 cassette. Pretty awesome little gear range, which gives you, well, not little, huge gear range, which gives you all sorts of pedaling potentials. Then we look at the wheel set. So we got a Roval CLX 2s. The 3s have just come out, which look pretty sick, but I'm still rocking the 2s. And yeah, they're a pretty awesome little wheel set. The frame set's obviously the Cannondale Supersix EVO. It's a 58. I probably should have gone a 60. But I really do like to have the smallest head tube as possible, especially if you could tell with my stem. Tyres, out back we got ourselves a 30mm Continental GP 5000 setup, tubeless. Yippee! And at front is a 28. Cockpit, we've got ourselves the Race Shop Limited handlebars, brought to you by Trek, in a 39 at the top, 42 at the drop, and we've actually got sprint shifters in there, which if you haven't ridden them, they're not just good on a sprint, but you can actually use them when descending. It's amazing to just gear down, gear down, gear down when you come into a corner without having to reach. It sort of keeps it all really nice and consistent. Saddle, 155mm specialized Roman mirror, very comfortable. So it's a pretty clean little build. It's definitely not the most stock build out there, especially the wheel set. I think I've had so many different comments saying, what are you doing with Rovals? That is a sin. But yeah, I really, really rate it nonetheless. So I think it's important just to sort of look at a bit of background and why I actually chose to get this bike. So I was lucky enough to be working for a pretty awesome bike shop in Adelaide, which sold so many different machines. Treks, Colnagos, Cannondales obviously, Cervelos were a pretty big one. And then the last three bikes I owned before this were actually Treks. So the Trek Monda, which was a killer machine, that was sort of my introduction to disc brakes. And then from then it was the Trek Madone SLR7, the red one, which was a beautiful machine. I absolutely love that machine. And then I sold it on and got the Generation 8 of that version, which was it was a machine. It was a machine nonetheless. In about October last year, had a little bit of a mingle in a race. Frame kind of broke on the Gen 8 bike. And so, yeah, we were trying to look at what exactly to replace it with, because I had a broken arm at the time, so I couldn't really do any riding. And so the Treks actually all sold out, which was what I was going to get. But then I saw that these Cannondales were kicking about, and one of the other boys in the shop had just got one and was absolutely raving about it. So I thought I'd bite the bullet, take it a little chance, especially not seeing the colours in the flesh. And then as soon as I got it, I was like, wow, this thing's an absolute machine. Put it together. It started out with Bontrager wheels, a few little component differences, but at this point in time, I'm pretty stoked with how it's set up. So that's sort of the background. And because I am lucky enough to have worked for that shop, I've been able to test ride so many different machines, Factors, Colnagos, Canyons, Specialized even. You name it, I've probably done an extended test ride on it. And yeah, it's pretty interesting to see the differences for sure. Is what do I like about it overall? So stepping up from the previous generation of Supersix EVOs, this thing is an absolute weapon. They've gone away with so many proprietary parts. The bottom bracket is a nice standard DSA, which is also used in Specialized. Integrated seat post doesn't creak as much as the last generation, which is pretty sick. Probably one of the more interesting quirks of this whole frame set is the steerer is actually a triangle. Comparatively, what I love about it though is firstly the color. The color's just crazy, man. Like the amount of compliments I've got even when I'm racing from other riders is like, it's pretty awesome. You know, it's a cool feeling. Like you're riding around, and because I've been in France, I've been riding around the tour and everyone's got their eyes on it because you can't really miss it, that's for sure, especially with the wheels and everything. The only thing that probably I could stand out a little bit more is maybe some envies with the triple white logo, but it's just been a huge step up from the previous generation, which I worked on heaps, I rode a bit, wasn't super impressive, but this is really nice. And so what I'm really stoked about as well is sort of its responsiveness and comfort factor. So I came from the Trek, which obviously had quite a big old hole in the frame, which was like a cantilevered little suspension design, and you feel it as you're bouncing around, and it was completely noticeable. It was a really awesome feature. My biggest concern was coming over, I was like, oh man, it's not going to be as comfortable. It's like a full straight setup, there's nothing crazy about it. And then I hopped on it and I was like, wow, this is actually sick. Like this is almost more comfortable than the Trek, which I was surprised about. So the comfort factor it's one of the best that I've ridden so far. Also the ability to just set it up in so many different configurations. I'm sure it's pretty obvious that I'm not running a one-piece bar and stem. I might do it in the future, but my position on the bike is something that makes a lot of people's backs hurt. So I'm pretty stoked to be able to run such a hooked stem with the own bar and stem. Obviously it's not as neat with the cables underneath there. I've actually changed out the top of the saddle like clamps there with one that made by Cervelo. So this means I can actually run a light integrated out there and then run the saddlebag under that. Keep it nice and really neat, which although it wasn't designed for it originally, it still works super well. This is a really cool bike so far that when you're climbing in it, you just feel like it wants to go. It holds its own on the flat. In fact, I won my first ever crit on here in A grade. It holds its own on the flat, but then once you turn it uphill, it just feels like it wants to go. From riding a Cannondale S5 and especially my Red Madone, when you're climbing up, especially some of those steeper hills, you sort of look down, and although the bike is acting perfectly fine and it feels amazing still, you look down and you just see so much carbon and so much aero that it's more of a mental block, I'd say. But with this, you're just like, okay, this can do it there. It can descend fast. It can do literally everything. And I've got KOMs up the hill. I've got KOMs downhill. I've got KOMs on the flat as well. And when you say it is do it all, it does do it all, and it does do it all really, really well. Some things that maybe I don't like about it as much. That steerer is a bit of an interesting part. Because it is a triangle, you have to run some spaces in there in order to get it to fill out correctly, which is a bit of an interesting little setup. Along with that, what I have noticed is, if the torque on the saddle post is just not perfect, it still will creep just a touch. It doesn't feel as fast as the Madone and the S5, which are pure aero bikes on the flat. It definitely helped with these wheels compared to the Bontrages and even the Reserves, which I've had previously. It just doesn't feel as fast. Obviously it feels a lot faster up the climbs, which is pretty sick. But there are a few moments when you're just like really kind of battling to maybe hold wheels that swap off bunches, or even in races. which the Trek and even an S5, which I borrowed for a little bit, absolutely dominated on. Probably another thing is when I came to France, I packed the bike box quite tight, put my big old toolbox in there, and I was kind of worried to see how the frame would go. The frame went fine, but one of the bottom cages got destroyed, so a little bit of a mix match there. Probably something I should sort out fairly soon. But yeah, another thing that's a bit of a struggle, the white frame, obviously it's a bit harder to keep clean, especially when it's white down the bottom bracket, so I find myself having to pull the cranks apart, clean it up, put them back together a fair bit just to head out on your next ride and just get brains on straight away. That is also a little bit frustrating, and a bit of a gripe of my own with the chainring, which has nothing to do with the Supersix itself. 55 tooth is killer, it's great to have that, but the power meter is a little bit special with, I think some people have called it the random number generator, and I have noticed that on all my rides, my right leg seems to be about 10% weaker than my left, which I've tested before and it's not really the case, it's kind of the opposite, or at least my right leg is in testing 5% better than my left leg. So that can make training a bit disheartening, especially when you have to do an FTP test and you're just like absolutely suffering and you're maybe not expecting numbers which you hope for. But you just sort of adjust it accordingly. And then, in fact, the reason I got this is because one of my friends back in Adelaide, we went for a ride. I only had a 52 at the time, and he just pedaled me off the wheel. Like I just could not. He just rode away on a descent, and I was in the draft. And I think once I got these, it's a pretty powerful feeling when you have the big old chainrings. Obviously, it does limit your climbing capabilities, and especially when you're on a bit of a slow, low zone 2 or even recovery ride, I find myself literally crawling up the climb. Like it would be faster for me to go up if I was probably walking, but at least I can track stand alright, and it means that I can go very slow. Like I think I'm pretty happy to just pedal up at 4k an hour if I need. Pretty stoked with it. I think the only way I can make it lighter is by changing out some of the Ultegra components. It's got Durace rotors, so I could probably change that to some Galfa rotors if I wanted to. Currently at its race form, it's looking at about 7.3 kilos, which for a 58 is very nice, very good. I know the Trek's never really got to that weight, even if you're missing a wheel. It's a bike that makes you want to get up and ride, especially when you look at it when it's inside, when it's clean, when it's not dirty from the white and the rain and any runoff in your drink bottles. It is a good looking machine and it rides basically as good as it goes. Thank you. Picasso, I like it!